Okay, I'm going to talk about international strategies. So share my screen here and we can go through the PowerPoint. Okay. There we go. So why do companies decide to sell to another country, right? To enter foreign markets? Number one, they may have pretty much maxed out the local market and they need to gain access to new customers, or they want to lower their costs from economies of scale or increased purchase power. They could want to further exploit their core competencies or gain access to resources and capabilities that are located overseas. Or they want to spread the risk of doing business across a larger group. So why competing across national borders makes strategy making more complex? Well, you're dealing with different countries that have different home country advantages in different industries. The value chain advantages for some countries is going to be different for others. There's going to be differences in government policies and tax rates, economic conditions, currency exchange rates, the risk of the economy and the currency, and then differences in buyer tastes and preferences. So we usually talk about finding an advantage for a company through this diamond of national advantage. So wherever your business is started, you have the home advantage. You know the demand, you know the conditions, you know everything that's happening there because you've grown the business in that environment and you've lived in that environment. So when you're going to go outside of your comfort zone into another country, you're going to need to look at what are the demand conditions. We know the home market size and growth rate. What is it overseas? We know buyers' tastes. What is it overseas? Then we've got factor conditions, the availability and relative prices of inputs, labor, material. We know it from our home advantage. We need to understand it somewhere else. And then you've got your related supporting industries, and you have the firm structure and the competitors, the rivalry that come into play, and you need to master all of those country by country. So the Diamond Framework helps you to answer some very important questions about competing on an international basis. So it can predict where new foreign entrants are likely to come from and what their strengths are. It can highlight foreign market opportunities where your rivals are the weakest. It can identify the location-based advantages for conducting certain activities in the value chain in different countries. So locating value chain becomes very, very important because this is where you can have savings. This is where you can really take advantage of entering that foreign market. So maybe they have lower wages that they pay, or their workers have a higher productivity. Maybe it's that they have lower energy costs or fewer environmental regulations. Maybe their taxes are lower, inflation rates are lower. Proximity to your suppliers and technologically related industries, proximity to your customers, lower distribution costs, and available unique natural resources. So for each of these, if you're going to enter another market, you're looking for any of these to be better in the other country than in yours in order to maximize that expansion. So government policies and economic conditions in the host country can also be crucial in you having a successful expansion or running into trouble. So Some countries might give you a tax incentive. They may have lower tax rates, lower cost on loans. Site location and development would be cheaper, maybe cheaper. Worker training may be well geared up. So those are the positives for that expansion. Negatives would be environmental regulations, subsidies and loans to domestic competitors that you don't have access to. There could be import restrictions or tariffs and quotas. There could be local content requirements, regulatory approvals, or profit repatriation limits. You could also have a minority ownership limit, where if you want to enter India, for example, you have to partner with an Indian company. If you go to Brazil, you need a Brazilian investor or ownership, because they don't allow you to own any property or anything in their country. So then there's the exchange rate. The effects of the exchange rate shift has a huge impact on your profitability. So exporters experience a rising demand for their goods whenever their currency grows weaker relative to the importing country's currency. Or the exporters experience a falling demand for their goods whenever their currency grows stronger relative to the importing country's currency. So if we compare the European Union to the US, the euro is stronger than the US dollar. So let's say the exchange rate is $1.30 to €1, okay? It means that the euro will buy more things technically in the US than the US dollar can purchase in Europe. So it's easier for them to come over here and spend money than for us to go to Europe and spend money. Now, let's say that the exchange rate was 6-1, or it was 20-1. You start to see that that difference also means that there's probably going to be a lower cost of living in that country that has the devalued money. And so entering that market could create a big advantage for you. So cross-country differences in demographic, cultural, and market conditions. So we've got two key considerations. Number one is to customize the offerings country by country to match the exact tastes and preferences of local buyers, or you pursue a strategy of offering a mostly standardized product worldwide. So if you take Harley-Davidson, for example, they have one product, they sell that product identical country to country. Even their advertising is going to be that rugged Harley-Davidson rider in every country that they sell. But when it comes to food, for example, take Coca-Cola, for example. A Coke in the US will taste sweeter than a Coke in Brazil or Mexico or Europe. Our tastes demand a higher content of sugar. So anyway, so those are some key considerations. So forms of international business. You have exporting, licensing, foreign subsidiaries, greenfield, joint ventures, strategic alliances. So we're going to go through each one of those and talk about them briefly. So when you are looking at strategic options to enter a competing or an international market, you want to make sure that you have enough advantages to make that a good option. So you want to maintain a national one country production base and then export goods to foreign markets. That is straight exporting. You can license foreign firms to produce and distribute the firm's products abroad. This is commonly done with manufacturers in the US who establish a relationship in China and have a Chinese company manufacture a product for the US. You can employ an overseas franchising strategy. You can establish wholly owned subsidiaries by either acquiring a foreign company or a greenfield venture, or you can rely on strategic alliances or joint ventures with those foreign companies. So advantages and disadvantages of exporting. You keep all production here in the US, you just send the finished product to different countries. So low cost, low capital requirement. You already have everything set up. Economies of scale in utilizing existing production capacity. You have no distribution risk and no direct investment risk. The disadvantages is that you're maintaining a relative cost advantage of the home-based production. Transportation and shipping costs can make it prohibitive for someone else to buy the product. The exchange rates could be a risk. And then there's tariffs and imports and loss of channel control. If you license or franchise, the advantages are that you have low resource requirements. Someone else is going to make it. You have income from royalties and franchising fees. So you've got a guaranteed income base there. You've got rapid expansion into many markets because you have other people investing. The disadvantages is that you maintain control of proprietary know-how. You can have loss of operational and quality control, and adapting to local market tastes and expectations may be outside of your control. When it comes to a foreign subsidiary, then you're building something in another country that you still maintain, that you own. The advantages are that you still have a high level of control. You have quick, large-scale market entry. You can avoid entry barriers. You can access to acquired firm skills. The disadvantages are the cost of acquisition, the complexity of that process, and integration of the firm's structures and cultures and operation and personnel that you're hiring locally can become challenging if you don't understand that market. Greenfield strategies, okay? So high level of control over the venture. These are joint ventures usually. You learn by doing in that local market. You've got direct transfer of the firm's technology skills, business practices, and culture. The disadvantages are capital cost of initial development. You have the risk of loss due to political instability or lack of legal protection of ownership. And it's the slowest form of entry because of the extended time requirement to construct your facilities. Benefits of alliances and joint ventures. So you gain the knowledge that your partner has of that local market. You can achieve economies of scale through those joint operation. You can gain technical expertise and local market knowledge. You can share the distribution facilities. You can direct competitive enemies towards mutual rivals, and you can establish working relationships with key officials in that host country because you're partnering with someone who knows that environment very well. The risks of alliances and foreign partners is that their knowledge and their expertise may be outdated. You may have cultural and language barriers. There's a cost of establishing a good, solid working relationship. There can be conflicting objectives and strategies. There can be differences of opinion. There's differences in corporate values and ethical standards that you'll have to deal with. There's loss of legal protection because you're showing someone else how to do something. And then there's an overdependence on the foreign partners for their expertise. So, competing internationally, there are three strategic approaches. Multi-domestic strategy, a global strategy, or a transnational strategy. Regardless of what entry method you took, Now there's a strategy of how do you compete. So multi-domestic strategy is that you create a strategy that works in each culture, in each country. A global strategy, you have one overarching strategy for everybody, and transnational strategies, they're specific to each environment. So global strategies, you think global, you act global. So the benefits from global integration and standardization are very high, but the need for local responsiveness is low. If you use a transnational strategy, you think global, you act local, you have high local responsiveness and pretty high global integration standardization. The multi-domestic, you think local and act local, so it's very responsive to the local, but there are very few global strategies. There isn't a right or wrong. Every industry has its habits and has its ways of doing things, and companies tend to function within those norms in their industries. So then you have to build a competitive advantage in the international market. You can use international location to lower the cost or to differentiate the product. You can share resources and share capabilities. You can gain cross-border coordination benefits. And really, you want to build a competitive advantage in every market. So key location issues will be whether you're going to customize offerings in each country market to match the tastes and preferences of the local buyers, or if you're going to pursue a strategy that's mostly standardized worldwide. Sharing and transferring resources and capabilities to build your competitive advantage. You can build a resource-based competitive advantage by using the power of a well-known brand to extend the differentiation-based competitive advantage beyond your home market. You can coordinate activities for sharing and transferring resources, production capabilities from country to country. And once you're in several countries, you can start taking advantage of the skills and the resources and whatever from each different country. So what about profit sanctuary of domestic only, international, and global competitors? So profit sanctuary, if you've got a domestic only company selling in your home market, you really have only one profit sanctuary, and that's the one in your country. If you are an international company that has a home market plus a number of other countries, that international competitor usually has a profit sanctuary in its home market and may have other sanctuaries in other countries. So in this illustration, let's say that you have your own home advantage and profit center. And then country E has very favorable market, and their taxes are very low. And so you can actually keep profit, especially if the market is very stable, the economy is stable. You can keep money over there and have a profit sanctuary. And the countries like, say, B, C, and D have higher rates. You can move the funds around to the home market or the country E to protect your profit as much as possible. Here's another illustration, same idea. Okay. Now, there are some concerns. Dumping is not a strategy that is looked on favorably. So dumping means that you sell goods in a foreign market at prices that are either below normal home market prices or below the full cost per unit. So dumping is not a fair trade practice. Governments can retaliate against it, and the World Trade Organization actively polices dumping to discourage such practices. Now, here's the deal. So let's say you make a computer in the US and you sell it for $1,300, okay? You take that same computer to, let's say, India, and based on their standard of living, their lifestyle, their income levels, very few people would be able to afford that 1,300. So if you lower the cost to sell in India, and it is either below the US price or worse, below the full cost per unit, then the World Trade Organization can say that you are dumping. So how do you get around that? And you're still able to sell the product at a good profit margin in the US and sell it in India. One of the ways that you do that is producing part of it in India where the labor rates are going to be lower. Therefore, you can lower the cost. Okay? So that's one of the reasons that companies will actually invest in other countries and sell products in those countries. So that takes us through the end of this chapter. I hope you've gained some good thoughts in that international environment and how to expand the business.